Everybody here tonight. My name is Aaron, and I'm one of the JNF Toronto Future Board members. We have a very interesting, deep conversation with Matt, which we'll meet in a few minutes. The not so hidden men's mental health crisis that I think will be very interesting for myself and everyone listening tonight. A couple things about the JNF future. Even though we're all virtual right now and everything is kind of a little crazy, the JNF Future Board is really working on webinars, community stuff to keep people entertained and all our minds stimulated. The JNF Future is a bunch of young professionals under 40 who give back to the obviously the Jewish National Fund. And we do a variety of events through the year. Usually we'd have live events, but obviously here we are. There's a bunch of upcoming events that we have coming up. Next week, or I guess 2 weeks, July 16th, we're doing a wine tasting with Dalton Winery. If you haven't ordered your wine yet, the deadline was actually moved to Friday, so you guys can order the wine. It's going to be an incredible experience. Money going obviously to the Jaffa Dalit After School Educational Enrichment Center. For tonight, we ask that everyone keeps their microphones muted. We'll be taking questions through the chat, so all you have to do is write your questions there, and I'll be asking questions. And let's get started. So I'm going to give you a little brief intro, Matt. Matt Zerker began his career in the finance kind of world, worked there for 7 years in asset management, achieving a highly valued CFA charter and becoming a portfolio manager. Despite his success, he felt deeply unfulfilled in his life. He felt little motivation to work, struggled in his personal and professional relationships, and had begun to turn to substance to try to numb some of that pain. In 2018, one of his best friends suddenly passed away at the age of 30. That then turned him into a deep depression. He was left at home. He felt like he had no point of living, and he wanted all that pain to stop. So he tried everything from therapy, medication, experimental treatments, and nothing really seemed to work. Then he found men's group and went on to men's retreat in April 2019. On that retreat, he had a profoundly life-changing experience. He came home from the retreat on a Monday, and by the Wednesday, quit his job with no fallback plan. One day having coffee with a friend, had the idea dawn on him, and he built this platform that we're about to talk about and everything. So now that I'm done reading, Matt, welcome. How's it going?
Thank you so much, Aaron. I'm doing really well. Thank you.
All right. So now that I can have a conversation rather than reading notes, sorry.
I know it's a tough gig to have to read a bio like that. You need to get we need to get more animation, more character into those types of things. So I tried to write it with a bit of a narrative and like a bit of oomph, but it's still hard.
Sorry. So how's this? Give us a 2-minute quick bio on kind of why we're here today and how you've changed the world with your platform and with what you do.
Thank you very much. Yeah, no, and I just want to thank the JNF for allowing me to be here. I've actually, in the past, I organized a mission to Israel with one of my close friends, John Schwartz, and much of that was facilitated by Lance Davis, who actually happens to be on the call tonight. And we organized an ag tech mission to Israel back in the day in 2015, actually, while I was still working in finance, and just kind of on the edge of a lot of this stuff happening. So I'm very grateful for the JNF and what they do and also the opportunities that they've given me personally and professionally, and being able to volunteer and organize within the community. So I'm a huge fan of the JNF, and I'm really grateful to be here tonight. In terms of the 2-minute bio, I know that took up about a minute of it, but yeah, I spoke. I spent a lot of years in finance, and I spent 7 years in finance. I was a portfolio manager at a quantitative hedge fund here in Toronto. I became a CFA charter holder, but nothing ever felt really right. I was kind of always reaching for this external validation, for this outside success, whether it was a partner or a degree or a title or something. I never quite felt like I could ever fully accept myself. Like there was always something else that I needed to do. And as a result, there was this hollow feeling inside of me. I was achieving, I was making good money in my career, I was advancing, everything on the outside looked pretty good, but inside, and when I got home at the end of the night, it just, everything started to fall apart. I would walk in my door and really not know what to do with myself. And there was just this hollowness, this emptiness that was kind of pervasive. And the only thing that would really numb that were substances, right? And I tried for a long time, to go to the gym more, to eat better, all of these different types of things, but nothing really seemed to work. And kind of the catalyst for, I think what can happen a lot of the time is if something big doesn't happen, we can kind of stay in that rut and in that groove for an extended period of time. And so while, it took, a very traumatic event for me personally to actually start changing my life, if I look back in hindsight, I won't say like I'm grateful for my my friend passing away, because I still wish he was with us and I still wish he was here on the planet. But I can look back and see that was a necessary thing that needed to happen in order for me to get to where I am today and doing what I'm doing. I was suicidally depressed for quite an extended period of time. I woke up anxious and panic attacks every single day. I didn't get out of bed in many ways, except to go to the bathroom and eat something small for an extended period of months. I went on mental health leave from work because I just couldn't do my job. I couldn't even leave the house. And so it got really, really dark for me. And it was in November of 2018 that one of my friends who I'd been talking with, who knew that I was struggling quite a bit, and was actually training to be a therapist at the time, funny enough. So I was leveraging him to get some free therapy out of the whole deal as well. Not really, but it ended up turning into that. And he said, I'm joining this men's group. And I think you should come join me. And I had tried everything by that point. I had tried medication, I had tried experimental treatments, I had tried therapy, and really nothing seemed to work for me. And in that experience, like for so much of this, like, and this is one of the issues around mental health and seeking mental health treatment, is because so many people are so uncomfortable with the topic in and of itself. So many people are just uncomfortable to hear that you're struggling. What they'll try and do is throw a bunch of solutions at you, right? They'll try and say, oh, well, you should try medication. You should go to therapy. Maybe you should become a vegan. Maybe you should work out more. Like they throw these solutions, because what they're really saying to you is, please stop talking about this subject because it's making me very uncomfortable. And maybe if you just take one of these solutions, then I won't have to actually talk about this with you anymore. And what was so different about the men's group format was that it wasn't about fixing problems. It was simply about holding space for one another. So I went into that group, sat down, and I said very candidly, like, I don't really see the purpose of me being here anymore. I don't know what I'm doing. My life feels hopeless. I'm single, I'm alone, and I don't know where this goes. And as opposed to like actually trying to fix the problem, what they simply did was say, we love you. Thank you for being here. And we worked with what was coming up for me. We worked with the anger. We worked with the shame. We worked with the hopelessness, but in a very different way than I had ever experienced before. And so if we fast forward until April of 2019, I went on a men's retreat with a company called Everyman, which operates out of the US. I was down in Massachusetts. And on that trip, I had been waking up every morning with panic attacks for about 9 or 10 months at that point. And if you've ever had a panic attack, you know that it's like the worst thing in the planet. It feels like you're out of control. It feels like you can't get your mind, under control. Everything seems like it's going to be a catastrophe. And I would wake up into that, right? So like it wouldn't be triggered by anything. It would be literally triggered by me opening my eyes in the morning. And the morning after this first night of this men's retreat was the first night I was able to actually lay in bed in some semblance of peace. And it was weird to me because like I woke up and the chest pains weren't there, the vibrations throughout my body weren't there, the tightness and constriction in my head weren't there. I was able to actually just like, and it's funny because like I remember what I did. I literally just rolled around in the bed and like felt the sheets on my body and like saw the light coming in from the window and just like really reveled in the experience of just lying in bed and enjoying that for the first time in what seemed like forever. And I finished the men's retreat. It was an incredible experience for me. And as you said, I went home on a Monday morning. I drove back to Toronto from near Boston, Massachusetts. I sat down at my desk on the Tuesday and I said, nope, this isn't going to work. And the next day I quit my job, and I've been doing what I'm doing ever since. It took me a little while to figure out what the angle was specifically, and I was still processing a lot of the stuff that had just come up through this whole thing. But eventually I was having a conversation, like you said, one day with a friend of mine, and the idea just sort of hit me like a tidal wave. I was like, all we need to do is build a space where men feel safe talking about these issues and connecting with each other, and we'll figure out the rest later. And we've been figuring out the rest later, basically, ever since then.
Okay, the 8 minutes. I'm just kidding. No, I was just teasing.
No, it was probably closer to 8 minutes than it was 2.
So my question to you is, why are men so scared to talk about these issues? We're going to start with that. Why are men, including myself, scared to talk about how we feel, what our problems are? Why do we feel that we need to, man up? Let's use that line, man up, and like you said, go to the gym and get rid of the anxiety, or not talk about the panic attacks. What's the stigma around that?
Yeah, and it's a great question, and like I would say the term man up really encapsulates the whole thing, right? It's just suck it up, go do what you have to do, and please, for God's sakes, do it without complaining. Right. And there's a couple reasons why. So first of all, if you look at just how we are socialized generally, the normative framework for masculinity in our culture is self-reliance. It is stoicism. And it's this idea of being the unwavering provider. Right. We've got to, make the money, deal with it. And this is like, I'm now speaking probably more to like cisgendered heterosexual males than I am all males. But, this is kind of where this culture really starts. It's this outdated normative structure of how we are supposed to act as men. And it's reinforced through it's reinforced through commercials. It's reinforced through movies. It's reinforced through Disney. It's like, it's this idea of like the prince that has nothing wrong with him coming and saving the princess, and they ride off into the sunset, right? And he's able to provide, he's unemotional. He's just like the perfect figure, physique, all of that kind of stuff. So it's actually really heavily indoctrinated in us. And then there's other barriers, right? So this is the structure that then everything trickles down through. And so there's some research that would suggest that actually the modalities that are typically associated with talk therapy aren't actually very well suited to the way that men like to solve problems and the way like men like to engage in these conversations. And then the other piece is that, as men, we are really trained to out alpha each other, outman each other, right? So there's this thing that, men do not feel safe sharing with each other. And that's the biggest problem of them all, is that if we say something to another buddy of ours or a friend of ours, especially a male friend, right? There's this feeling inside of us that we're going to be seen as less than. We're going to be seen as broken.
Or judging us. Sorry. Or
they're judging us, right? Exactly. Right. They're judging us. And so what that ends up doing is that it forces us to push these feelings down inside of us. It forces us to put on a good face. It forces us to sit in jobs that we don't really like because, we want to have the salary, the title. We want everything that kind of comes with that. And so what ends up happening is we externalize our success. Everything becomes about how we look as opposed to how we feel. And so we've told, and this is the thing, there's a very big difference between the way women are socialized, or girls, I would say, are socialized, and the way boys are socialized. Girls are socialized to be in touch with their feelings, to express how they're feeling. Women are very effective at creating support structures amongst themselves. Men simply don't do that. At a certain point in our lives, we are told that it's not okay to cry, that we need to suck it up, and that we just need to deal with whatever's coming with us. And that programming that we are given from society is so damaging, right? Because what it ends up doing, because human emotions are human at their very core. Everybody has emotions, whether it's fear. Like if you don't have emotions, you're a robot. That's just the way it is. But for some reason, we've told boys, who then become men, that it's not okay to have emotions. And so if you deny a person having emotions, you're actually denying a part of their humanity. And so they don't actually feel human. They feel like a shell of themselves. And so when we push that away, people become disconnected from themselves. They become disconnected from their relatives, from their family. They become disconnected, most importantly, from themselves. And so they're unable to be truly authentic because this part of them is actually being denied in a fundamental way. And for some people that, it doesn't matter as much. This affects people. This isn't an equal effect that happens. It affects different people differently. But for a lot of men, what ends up happening is because they end up pushing all of those things down, it comes out in anger, it comes out in frustration, it comes out in all of these behaviors that we've associated with negative aspects of masculinity, right? And it's because we don't give men the opportunity or the permission or the space to actually express what's really going on. If you show me an angry man, what I can tell you is that there's a very sad little boy underneath there. So that would be kind of I think some of the high level points of it, but we can totally jump into like specific aspects of each of those.
Yeah. I was just going to bring up a point that you just said. Funny enough, is I was talking to my wife right before this, and I said to her, I'm doing this with you tonight, and I mentioned kind of how men don't communicate like women do. Just in general, I find women on a regular basis communicate better than men. They just know how to speak their feelings, and they just, I made my wife upset. She right away slams the book on me and says, you upset me, versus us who will let it kind of sit inside of us, and we don't really, it pisses us off, but we don't really talk about it because it's just, like you said, it's not the manly thing to do, I guess.
Yeah.
So, to kind of keep that going, I do want to kind of take this a little bit higher and kind of talk about why men, don't ask for help, why men, why they continuously, and I know you've kind of, gently touched upon it, but why men really kind of hold it in instead of really working on communicating with their spouses, their parents, their siblings, their friends, their coworkers. What kind of emotions they feel, and how men can work on letting go of some of this.
Yeah.
We'll call it rage, actually, because you're right. I think it's a sad boy inside of an angry person.
Yes, exactly, right. And it's like that boy that feels wounded, that feels hurt, and doesn't feel like they can express that, and then it comes out in anger, right? Because they're angry that they can't truly express what they're actually feeling. And the simple reason why this happens is because we don't have it modeled for us, right? This is generational. It happens generation after generation after generation. You have, fathers who didn't feel like they had permission to express, who then raise sons that see their fathers who didn't express anything, who then raise sons, and the chain goes on and on and on and on. Now, that's not 100% of fathers. I know many of my friends' fathers who are exceptionally emotionally available. So, this is not a rule, but this is a very good generalization. And the reason, again, coming back to it, it's because this is what we see. And when we see this archetype of the successful male, look at any movie that you've really seen, like, movies like Wall Street or the movie with Leonardo DiCaprio where he's like isolated and he's like killing bears with his bare hands, and like he's afraid, but like he never actually cracks under the pressure. That's what we see. And so there's this unrealistic expectation that we feel that we need to live up to this status, this archetype of what a true man is. And I think, especially like I'm going to jump now to sort of, Jewish culture, especially, there was a lot of other inherited trauma that we have as Jews that sort of then compound on this, right? So what's interesting is I think, like, especially when it comes to Jewish culture, like, a lot of Jews haven't felt safe as persons in societies because for so many generations, we've had things taken from us. We've had our livelihoods taken from us. We've been, shipped off and taken away from our homes, taken away from our families. So when you add this layer of lack of personal safety, right, and lack of safety as a being, like as a Jewish person, I don't feel safe in certain aspects of society because I know that, my ancestors' livelihoods have been taken away from them. And as quickly as a generation before. And we still have people that are telling stories about what it was like to have everything taken away from them, to be shipped off, and to have parts of our families killed. So you compound that lack of safety as a people with this socialized normative structure where we're told that we need to sort of hold it together. And it's no wonder so many men struggle silently with depression, anxiety, and stress. We actually just launched a campaign the other week on July 1st, and it's called the Close the Gap campaign. And so the statistics are that 77% of men deal with stress, anxiety, or depression in some form or another. 40% of men, a full 40% of men, say that it would take thoughts of suicide, it would take suicidal thoughts or thoughts of self-harm for them to seek any support or help. Like, that's what we're dealing with, is that most men say, I would need to be thinking about wanting to kill myself before I actually reached out for any kind of support. That's a mind-boggling statistic. And then you bring it back to the way that women are sort of naturally socialized. If you think about it, they're encouraged to show their emotions and their feelings. They're encouraged to share with each other. They're able to hit that pressure release valve with their friends. It's okay. And they're also allowed to touch each other. They're allowed to hug each other, kiss each other. That is also not something that is stigmatized. So they get physical touch. They get an area and an arena where they can actually express their emotions. And it's not something where it's a weird conversation to be having, right? For a lot of men, right, they feel like in order to have that conversation, they've got to like do this thing where they puff out their chest and they sit there, and then all of a sudden they're like, man, I need to have a conversation with you, right? Like, we need to preempt it. Like, we need to be like, okay, so we need to have a conversation about something, as if having that conversation is weird in and of itself, right? Whereas, like, I don't know personally, but I don't feel like that barrier exists for women. They can just like call somebody up, have the conversation, get it out, and then move on, right? So we don't have that release valve, like as men generally. Right now, there are communities, and this is sort of to the third point of your question of how can men actually begin this journey. So the first answer that I will give is Tethr, right? Obviously, shameless plug for what we're doing, but we have a peer-to-peer support community where we are creating a safe container where it is okay to begin these conversations. We want to allow men to take that first step, to be able to throw out that first post, to be able to say, I am not okay right now, right? I am not okay. These are the things that we're dealing with. And to be honest, like, it's pretty amazing to me to see how quickly those conversations are already happening, I should say, on a mobile application between guys that don't know each other. And what's even more surprising is to see some of your friends talk about things that you're like, we've never talked about this in person, and now you've thrown out this completely public post into the forum. So what's really interesting is that if you give men the space to be able to do that, and you say, you are safe doing this here, it is an okay behavior for you to actually share, men want that outlet. What's super interesting to me is that 93% of men, and this was a study done by a guy named Dr. Michael Kimmel, who's an expert in masculinities. He did a study where 93% of men do not identify with the way that masculinity is portrayed in the media. So basically all men do not identify with what it means to be a man, like as we traditionally say, and yet we're all holding ourselves to this standard, to this impossible standard of masculinity, which is such a tragedy. Because like what I can tell you is my relationships, I have built some incredibly deep, connected relationships with other men, and and it's all been because we've actually sat in these spaces and said to each other, this is what I'm going through, and this is truly what I'm feeling. So you have Tethr, right? That is the first step, and we're going to be trying to build a platform that normalizes this, destigmatizes this, and then also gives men the ability to connect with other men that are going through the same thing. So we're going to be building out that platform right now. We're actually going to be raising a Kickstarter in the next few weeks. So we're going to be trying to raise some money to really put some financial financial resources behind building out a really big platform that actually can meet the needs of the men in our community. There's men's groups that you can go to. They're a little bit harder to find. It's slightly disparate, but you have Every Man out of the United States. They've built out a fully mobile platform right now that you can engage in. There's Man Talks as well. There's another one called A Call to Men. So there's pockets in these communities, but it really is very nascent. It's kind of a big blue ocean, like where everybody is really just starting to wake up to this. And I think COVID has had a tremendous impact on making this okay. I think mental health, more than it ever has been, is in the spotlight. And it's also now more than ever okay to start talking about these things. So I think in a lot of ways, it's been a blessing. It's been hard, and people have passed away, and I wouldn't want to minimize the experience of people who have lost friends, family members, who have lost their jobs through this process. But it really has shone a spotlight on this need for collective healing as a community, and I think even more so put an emphasis on the need for men to actually begin having these conversations.
Yeah, and I agree, and that's why I wanted to have this conversation with you tonight. Funny enough, is because going through the last 4 months, I would say I was one of those stereotypes of men who didn't want to talk about their feelings, who put his chest up. Funny enough, Daniel mentioned a comment here about how you want to shake a hand a little stiffer to kind of show your dominance, which is something I'm the first to admit. I want to kind of show my dominance versus, like, why aren't we giving each other hugs? Okay, COVID, fine, no more hugs for now. But like, why can't a guy go up to a guy he's about to do business with and just give him a big hug, say thank you, right? Or thanks for giving me an opportunity, or thanks for doing business with me. Like, why is there such a problem with men crying on another man's shoulder, or talking about their drug problem, or talking about their wife? Why can't men, why can't I go to, one of my buddies and say, hey, like, I'm not getting the emotional that I need for my wife. Like, can you help me? Can you send me somewhere to get some help? So, I mean, I agree. And I mean, I'm in a completely different place now, just because this has, I think, humbled, whether you're rich or you're not, or you're middle class. I think everyone's humbled. Everybody's humbled from this, right? So let's talk about some mental health stuff. What can you recommend to people who are feeling down right now because of COVID? Because I think that's a great segue. What can we do to shape up a little bit more mentally? So, are there, give us some tips on, talking to people, or if it's even teaching someone how to reach out to someone else. How's that? How can, because I'm actually the first to admit, like, you and I will probably talk after this, because I think now I want to reach out to you because I think you'll be there for me. So I'll let you go ahead with this. Sorry.
No, and there's a lot there. And what's interesting is that men are actually emotionally disproportionately affected by divorce than women are, because especially in male-female relationships, typically the only point of emotional support for a man is his wife. And that is not necessarily true for women. Like they'll have their emotional support systems with other women in their life. But for men, it's actually typically their wife is the only one that they talk to about anything emotionally. And what's interesting is like, even when guys do hug, right, it's like, you know, they clasp hands and then there's still the hands creating space between them so that they don't actually touch chests or anything like that. And then we tap each other on the back, like, you know, the straight guy double pat on the back, right? So it's like,
Yeah.
you know, it's not like an embrace. It's actually just like, all right, thanks so much, you know, good stuff there, right?
Yes.
And there's a number of reasons for that. I mean, I hate to use it, I hate to say it, but it's homophobia is part of it, and the worry that if you really go in for like a sincere embrace, that says something about your sexuality. Again, this normative structure of, you know, how men are supposed to be. We're supposed to be self-reliant, unemotional, and then like being emotional is somehow an indication that you are less of a man. And then, you know, a lot of people then draw the connection between that and, you know, your own sexuality. Well, what does this mean? If I need emotional connection and I need contact from other men, it must say something. I can tell you it actually doesn't. We actually grew up, we've evolved in tribes. Like as men, we've actually evolved spending extended periods of time together in very, very close quarters. So we have this need for community. We have this need for contact. We have this need for connection. Like, if you think about, like, you know, thousands of years ago, you and I would have probably spent 3 weeks in the forest hunting together. Like, we would have inevitably talked about things. We would have talked about everything. We would have talked about our relationships, our kids, what's going on in the village. Like, it just would have happened. And we don't do that anymore. And we're also living these segmented lives. I mean, I am a huge extrovert, if that isn't already clear. But like, I'm a huge extrovert. I love being around people. So spending, 18 hours a day in my apartment working and not being able to collaborate, not really being able to see my friends. Like, one of the biggest things that I've missed is hugging my parents, right? And hugging other friends. I have a lot of friendships with people where we are on a hugging basis, and like, not just like the tapping on the back, but like real actual hugs with male and female friends. But I'm going to speak specifically to the male friends. That's been a huge thing for me. And it's really worn on my mental health, not being able to see people, not being able to truly connect with other people. So in terms of like why we don't do that, I think like this again goes back to that sort of outdated notion of masculinity. Right. And then there's some stuff underneath there, and I don't need to get too much into it, but I do want to jump across to what we can be doing during this time, right? And I think I mean, I can give you like, you should probably meditate, you should probably work, you should probably drink less alcohol, don't smoke pot, really, if you do, because that's going to have an impact on your mental state. You should probably start eating better, right? All of these things definitely compound on themselves. And by the way, I am not perfect. I am so not perfect. I'm still a smoker, right? Which is something that I don't like about myself, but it's helped me get through this period of time. So I think whatever you need to cope is really the most important thing. Be softer on yourselves. That is the number one thing. And I'm saying this as much as for myself as I am for anybody else. I tried to quit smoking during COVID. That was the dumbest thing that I've ever done in my entire life. Right? Like, I had this expectation that we were going to get into COVID, that I was going to start working out every single day. I was going to eat perfectly, not touch alcohol, and I was going to quit smoking cigarettes. Right. Like, it's completely unrealistic. So the first thing is be realistic with yourself. Be caring with yourself, right? Don't set yourself up for an impossible standard that you're going to fail. And like, to be perfectly honest, I'm telling myself this as much as anything, because I had the intention of getting up tomorrow morning at 5 a.m. and doing a workout before I got into my day. That's probably not reasonable. What I can probably do, and what I can probably say I will do, is I will get up at 7, I will do 15 push-ups, and then I will take a shower. That is something that I can do. So it's like these little bits of habit stacking, doing small things that are just like a little bit more than you did yesterday. And I would, like, for the men that are actually on this call, I would actually encourage them to reach out to a close friend of them and actually ask them how they're doing, like really how they're doing, like, and say, like, it's okay. If you're not doing okay, that's totally fine. I'm here to talk to you. Give them that opportunity. They may not take it because they may not be that type of person, but give them the opportunity. And even I would say be vulnerable yourself, right? Take that risk of actually opening up to somebody. Take the risk of saying, you know what, I'm struggling with this right now. Do you mind if we have a little bit of a conversation about it? And I would say that most guys would say, yeah. And what you're going to find is that the connection between the two of you is going to be so much greater after that call, right? You don't have to go totally all the way deep down the rabbit hole. I think that things like therapy, or like I still go see a therapist, right? I'm completely unashamed about going to see a therapist. That's really where I get into my deep stuff. And then in the men's groups, right? And there's a very different there's a different process that typically goes on in men's groups versus therapy. Therapy tends to be a little bit more cognitive, depending on who the person is that you're working for. If you're doing CBT, they're going to give you a bunch of ways to try and shift your thoughts. That never really worked for me personally. I liked going into like the origins of it and all of this kind of stuff. It's an intellectual process for me. But what I think is super important is like if you can find the time and find a men's group and you feel called to do some of this work, that then becomes more about just feeling your emotions, right? It's a much more somatic process. And by somatic, I mean something that is in your body, because the thing with emotions is that they actually originate in our bodies, not in our minds. They're a signal that happens in our bodies that are then our brain interprets based on a story that we've told ourselves. So it'll be tightness in the chest. It'll be like a vibration in the legs. And then we've come to interpret that as, oh, that's anxiety, or oh, that is depression, or oh, that is this. But if we can non-judgmentally sit with some of those things and just simply say, I accept exactly what I'm feeling right now and fully feel all of that, you can actually start to do a lot of the work with yourself, right? Which was something I was actually doing programming with the house the other week. And what the part that I was trying to impart to other people is that we don't need to interpret, right? It doesn't need to be an alarm bell whenever we feel anxious. We can simply feel anxious and sit with that and not try and change anything. I think what we want to do in society so much is we want to have a fix. We want to have a solution. We just don't want to feel this anymore. So I think one of the things that we can do is we can even normalize these feelings within ourselves by just sitting with them and saying, this is what anxiety feels like in my body. So that was a lot of stuff, but therapy, exercise is definitely important. Diet is important. Limiting the use of substances as much as possible. And then I would say is, really start to have some conversations with each other, right? Take the chance, start having a conversation and say, you know what? I've been feeling this way for a while. And what that ends up doing is when you take the first step, what I think you'll find more often than not is that other person is going to take another step with you. And then the relationship's going to be better. So I would say take the risk, really take the risk, because there's so much goodness on the other side of taking that risk.
In regards to, because you mentioned talking to friends versus, let's say, talking in a group, right?
Mm-hmm.
So more of I guess random people versus people you're closer with. What are your feelings on that? Because I feel like the conversation you would have with your friends, you're not as open, you don't feel as comfortable, kind of dishing out all your dirt, even though technically, your closest 1, 2, or 3 friends should be those people who you could discuss. Do you think that? Should you be opening up to those people? Should you be instead going to a group? Should you be doing both? What are the kind of the benefits of one versus the other that you've kind of felt? And then, what can you recommend to kind of who'd have what conversations with? I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. I think one of the things that you need to be careful with if you're going to do it with a group of your friends is that there's a high degree of likelihood that group dynamics take over and it doesn't end up being what you think it's going to be, right? So when we do our men's groups, right, first of all, none of us were friends before the men's group, right? So we're all guys that have done some work by ourselves individually, and we're coming to this work being like, I want to do this specific type of work. Right? So we have agreements in our group that we follow. We have protocol that we follow. We have a way that we drive men deeper into their experience. And so if you're just going to try and have a men's group between a bunch of guys that you've grown up with, you're very quickly going to revert back to these group dynamics, and it's probably not going to go the way that you want, right? Or somebody's going to make enough off-colored comment because that's what that guy does in the group. It shuts everybody down. It cracks that barrier. So when you're doing group work, it's really, really important that there's an effective container that's put around it. And what I mean by that is that there are understandings as to why you're there. There's rules as to how you operate. There's a protocol and a way that you drive each other deeper into the experience, and that you're all validating the person's experience as opposed to more of a free form situation. So I think if you're going to begin the process, it's actually better to pick the person that you really, really trust, right? Pick one person that you really trust and say, I want to chat about something. I need to get something off my chest. I don't really want to, maybe in your case, it's I don't really want to talk with my wife about this specific thing. And you can start at a level that's not like, I feel depressed, right? It could be like, I'm really struggling with work. I feel like I need to be a provider. I need to be a good husband. I need to be all of these things. And the pressure just feels like so much right now, compounded with COVID. And I'll bet you that friend, if they're a father, a parent, a business owner, or a professional, is going to have something that feels very similar, right? And he's going to be like, yeah, I feel that way. That's an opening, right? For you to start that conversation with each other. And then it can be something where it's like, you know what? I really enjoyed this. I would love to check in again. Like, you don't have to do it every week or every 3 days or something like that. But it's like, maybe next month we can chat about it again. But like, make a plan to actually have a conversation, and have that conversation be under the understanding that we're going to talk about something that's not just like the Leafs or the Raptors or, what the stock market did yesterday, right? Mm-hmm. Like, let's make it about something a little bit more personal. And I think it's really important that both people understand what the context of the conversation is. Like, I had a horrible, and sometimes still do, where it's like, I'll be having a conversation with somebody and I'll jump into something that's like really deep and emotional, and, it's me sort of getting something off. And what we have to be really careful of is that we don't dump stuff on other people, right? Because just because we are unloading this feeling that we're having doesn't mean that that person is in a place where they actually want to receive that, right? Because there is an energetic exchange that happens between people. If, like, let's say that the person that you're talking with, right, all of a sudden, like, his uncle's in the hospital as of that day and you didn't know that, and he just came from something where his kids were yelling at him and his wife said something to him that made him feel a certain way, and he's got all of this weight on top, and then all of a sudden you drop this next thing and he's got to be there for you. That just may be too much for that person. So it's really important that you have rules of engagement, basically, where you're saying to each other, is it okay for us to talk about this? Like, are you in a place where you can handle this? That's really super important. And then I think, if you do go to therapy, right? And by the way, I think everybody should be in therapy. And if you go through my family, everybody in my family should definitely be in therapy to some degree or another, right? And I say that very lovingly because we're all crazy, but in that really awesome, amazing way that a lot of Jewish families are crazy. We have that craziness, but I think it's really important, if you really want to start having these conversations, start modeling that behavior in therapy, right? Start saying, you know what, I do want to have more connected, deeper relationships with close male friends of mine. How would I start that conversation, right? How would I begin that, right? And your therapist they'll probably be able to help you model that behavior. And I think that's a super important thing. And then the other thing is that so many guys that I know, like all of my buddies now, it's crazy. Like, all of my buddies are like basically telling me like, oh my God, thank God you said something. Do you know what I mean? Like, it was like, we were all holding all of this in. Thank God that you said something, because I've been waiting for somebody to actually be the first one to take the step, because most men don't feel like they can be the ones to take the first step. So when somebody actually steps out and does it, I think a lot of people really, really appreciate that. And as opposed to what the fear is, which is we're going to be like, shunned or this or that or whatever, what ends up happening is you give another person permission to share something with you, right? And it's that exchange that is really beautiful.
So what you're pretty much saying, and correct me, like we pretty
Yeah.
much have to brand male openness. So we pretty much have to, Nike's been branding, let's, just do it.
Yeah.
And, Mr. Clean, like all these brands, we need to brand this and educate people on why it's okay to talk, or men
Yes.
specifically, but everybody, why it's okay to talk about your emotions, why it's okay to have a friend to talk to, why it's okay to go to group, why it's okay to have go see a coach or any of the above, right? Or all the above. So how can we, this is good, how can we educate the average male?
Yeah.
Because again, we're talking about men's health, men's mental health. How can we educate men to get the help they need?
So, I mean, there's a lot of great resources out
And,
there.
And why it's okay. And why it's okay to get the help they need instead of the stigma that you said. Again, we both discussed of being this masculine, man up, tough guy, angry, sad little boy inside. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. So there's a ton of resources out there. Heads Up Guys, which is one of our partners, is a great resource for the leading resource globally right now around male depression, anxiety, and suicidality. And they have tons of resources that you can use to actually begin these conversations. They give you ways that you can broach it. So headsupguys.org is a great first step for most people. We're actually listed on Heads Up Guys website. So they actually list us as a tool that they recommend to men in their network. And we've had a number of guys find us now through Heads Up Guys, which is pretty incredible. Movember is also an organization that does a lot of awareness. We know them for testicular cancer, but they've gone really super heavy into the mental health side of things. And actually, one of the medical advisors on our project is the head of programming for on the mental health side of things at Movember. So and that's another thing, is we are actively collaborating with the medical community. We have 3 medical advisors who are like the only people that are publishing research on this right now. So the other thing is that because this is such a tricky topic, and because it's like, this is something that is baked into the fabric of society, it is a difficult thing. So one of the things that we are doing is the Close the Gap campaign. Right. So having people actually share their stories, actually having people share videos and say that we support this and that it's okay. I think we need to collectively create a space. And that's why we don't just, speak to men. We actually ask women to be advocates of ours as well. So I think women have an exceptionally important role to play in this by saying that they want, like, one of the things that I've gotten from a lot of women actually is like, oh my God, thank God you're building something like this, because I just can't take my husband anymore. Right? Like, he needs to go talk to somebody. And I'm like, yeah, I know he needs to go talk to somebody, which is great. Right? So I think it's important that we're all having this conversation with each other. And I think what it does take is it takes some really strong men to actually be the first people to put their foot in that arena. I know like my coach personally, other men's coaches who are like, it's so funny, but like, they are the guys that I looked up to, and I'm like, those are real men. Like, what's so interesting is the guys that are actually emotionally available and can actually hold space for them, they become the best leaders.
And what's funny is it's great. My coach is actually a female.
Right.
So that's very funny, because I want that emotional, not just the business.
Yes.
It's very interesting. Yeah. Yes, it's very interesting.
And I've had female coaches as well. And actually, my therapists for the longest time have been female. And I actually felt at some point, it was like I needed more male energy in those conversations for me. But I needed male energy, not just for the sake of male energy. I needed male energy in the context of emotional work. Right. Because there was something very healing about it. And this is what I discovered through these men's groups. So it's first, let's start a conversation, right? So we actively start a conversation. We use social media to be able to do it. We share resources. We try, and I hate the word destigmatize, because like, it's like it makes it seem like there's something wrong with it that we're undoing, right? And it was right all along, right? It was right all along that we should share it. Just like all of this stuff got covered up by layers and layers and layers of crap because of just, you know, how we operate as a society. So I would just say, like, let's put some light on this, right? Let's give men permission to have these conversations. Let's give each other, like, this actually starts at a very micro grassroots level. This doesn't start with some big campaign, government dollars and stuff like that. It literally starts with us giving each other the permission to have this conversation.
Matt,
Right?
can I talk to you about this? Can I talk to you
Yes.
about this, Matt?
Yes,
Can we talk
exactly.
about
It's
this?
like you literally calling your buddy, your friend,
Yeah.
whatever,
Yeah.
and saying, we need to have a conversation about something, right? I need to talk to you about this. And then make sure also at the end that you are giving that person space to also say something back to you, right? So it actually starts in these really organic one-on-one conversations. And like I said, like, most men, if you give them that space, they take this deep breath and they're like, oh my God, thank God you said something. Because like I was ready to like completely explode. So I think there's that. I mean, this is also why I'm building Tethr, is because there isn't anything in the market right now that actually gives men the ability to take that first step into this type of emotional work. There's therapy, but there's barriers to therapy for a lot of men, and that's like typically stigma, lack of other males that they know going to it and talking about it. Because when men go to therapy, the biggest thing that men say is like, you know, doc, I'm not like other guys. And the therapist will go, why? And they'll be like, well, because I'm here.
That's a
Right. So
thing.
we don't, because I'm here.
That's a thing. So that's
Yes,
a comment, really.
that is the number one, and this is coming from Dr. John
Wow.
Agranachuk at the University of British Columbia, who's also the founder of Heads Up Guys. That is the number one thing that he hears from men who step into his office, is that I'm not normal because I am here doing something about my mental health. So that is the first thing, is like actually being like proud to say, I go to therapy, to your friends. Like being able to say, like, I go to therapy and I'm not ashamed of it, and it's massively helpful. Those are the types of things that create ripple effects. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to be able to really like supercharge that whole thing, right? By creating a platform where men can connect with each other. They can have these conversations around, you know, a whole variety of things. And by the way, it gets into the stuff that nobody wants to talk about. And that's what we need. We need to make it so that none of these conversation topics are unspeakable. Because when you make something unspeakable, it means that that person feels like they are like completely flawed and broken. Because if they can't speak about it, then there's something fundamentally wrong with them. And so if we can actually just shine a light on this, it becomes a really good disinfectant for the problem. And the first step is having these conversations so that people can take that first deep breath, right? And that first deep breath is like knowing that they're just not completely, and I could see your chest and your shoulders relax as I said that, right? Right. And it's like, it's that first little piece where you're just like, okay, I can breathe now. Like there's something I can do about it. I'm not broken because I feel this way, right? That is the most important thing, is when you actually normalize it, right? And again, I hate saying normalize because it means that it implies that it's abnormal in some way, right? Which I don't like.
Right.
But if we can have that conversation, right, then it becomes something that is okay. It means that that person is seen, felt, all of that kind of stuff. And when we can actually do that, then you can actually have men starting to take care of themselves, right? Men comprise only 30% of the utilization of mental health resources. That means that men underutilize mental health resources by somewhere in this nature of 60%. Right. So, 49 minus 30, 19 over 30, about 60, an underutilization of mental health services by about 60%. Right. That's outrageous. And that's the big thing, right? Is if we can just start the process, provide that first step for people, the uptake of those other services is going to start to be massive, because we've actually learned a couple really interesting things from men just by having conversations. Like, so I've personally had conversations with about 350 men at this point, like one-on-one conversations where I'm basically interviewing these guys. And what's the most interesting thing is that men have a strong preference for peer support as an entry point for seeking help. They actually want to talk to other guys and be like, hey man, did you go to therapy? What was it like? And then they're more likely to go to therapy, but they are less likely to go to therapy if they're not able to have that conversation. And the other big thing is that men need other men to model positive attitudes towards openness and sharing in order to feel safe doing it themselves. So I think that's really where it starts.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say, if there's any quick, we're almost done, but I want to see if there's any questions. I think that at a whole level, there's a lot of formula to having a healthy mind. I think that, going back to your point of just, drugs, liquor, alcohol, healthy eating, proper working out. But I think on top of all that, I think the most important thing of healthy living is talking about it. Just like you work out to get bigger muscles, you need to release some of that mental strain and mental stress by talking it through. And I appreciate our conversation. I hope people learned something tonight, and I know I did. And I hope to grow a relationship with you, because I think that you got something really great here, and I'm looking for the help. So it's amazing, and I wish you luck with everything. And thank you to everybody, and have a great evening and stay safe.
Thank you so much. And I just want to say thank you, Aaron. And I would love to continue growing this friendship and stuff that we've built through going through this webinar process. I really appreciate it. I'm there for you. Whatever you need, you can always feel free to reach out.
I just so you know, this call is being recorded, so we've got that. That's good. That's good to know.
Yeah, you can hold me to it.
I'm going to. All right. All the best. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Take care.